Welcome to the Intelligence Briefing Live, What's the Buzz, where leaders and hands-on experts share how they have turned hype into outcome. Today, we'll talk about the trends that will shape intelligent automation and AI in 2023. And who better to talk to about it than three experts in this space, Shail, Khiyara, Frank Casale, and Ian Barkin. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining.
Hey, Andres, thanks for having us here.
Happy to be here.
That's awesome. Hey, I'm sure most people in the audience might already know who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself real quick? Shail, Frank, and Ian.
Sure, my name is Shail Khiyara. I've been in the automation space for the last decade. I've had the opportunity to help shape this market and work for three leading automation providers, Automation Anywhere, Blue Prism, and UiPath. I now run an independent customer think tank called Vocal, which stands for Voice of Customer in the automation landscape. And I've also joined and served on the board of 𝘄𝗶𝗹𝗹 and joined 𝘄𝗶𝗹𝗹 as a president and COO. Over to you, Frank.
Fantastic, great. Yes. Yeah.
Super, great to be here. Appreciate the invite. Frank Casale here, coming to you from New York. I guess most notably founder of the Institute for Robotic Process Automation and AI. That's why I know most of the people in this space. Prior to that, founded the Outsourcing Institute. So had a good run, maybe close to 2 decades in the labor arbitrage space. In the last decade, more in the kind of automated labor and related. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Fantastic, great to have you with us. And over to Ian.
Thanks for having us. Yep, Ian Barkin. I have spent a decade in the RPA intelligent automation space. Learned about it actually first and foremost from a conference that Frank threw way back in like 2013. Co-founded Symphony Ventures, which is an RPA consultancy and advisory, which I then sold a few years ago, and kind of spend my time now creating LinkedIn learning courses, generally trying to develop useful and educational content. And investing and advising startups and disruptors in the world of work. Thanks for having us here.
Fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. And if you're just joining the stream, drop a comment in the chat where you are joining us from. I'm really curious to see how global our audience is, because we have more than 930 people that said, hey, I'm interested in this show. I want to watch it. So awesome. 2 more quick things to share with you before we really get started. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter at intelligencebriefing.com and stay up to date how you can run AI and automation projects successfully. And actually today, I'm launching What's the Buzz AI in Business as a podcast, so you can listen to past episodes on the go. You'll find it on all the major podcast platforms if you look for it, What's the Buzz AI in Business. So go check it out. Now, we have plenty of time for your questions as well today, so please don't be shy and put them in the chat as well. So let's finally jump right in. First question for you, Frank. I know a lot of organizations have implemented RPA over the last couple of years, and many automation leaders are now wondering what's actually next. So how can they build on their existing program or initiative in 2023? And what we say are the major trends that they should look for?
Well, I would say if you've turned on your laptop at all in the past 30 days, we all know what's next. It's ChatGPT, but we'll build up to that. Crescendo. From where I sit, Andreas, the majority of the people that have invested in RPA over the past decade are typically looking for what I would say ROI amplifiers, majority, and it typically takes, I would say, about 12 months before an enterprise user realizes that they need some adjacent technology. And the bulk of what I'm seeing in our space are things like IDP and conversational AI as 2 kind of big plays that are great bolt-ons. It's not a rip and replace. Either one of them are overlays. And the majority of RPA users that I see that are getting a real return on investment from their RPA investment is not directly through RPA as a standalone. It's really more through these adjacent technologies that suddenly begin to have much greater impact. So I'll stop there, not to take up too much time, but that's kind of what we're seeing. Basically, a lot of activity, see what my colleagues think, a lot of activity in the IDP space, conversational AI, conversational business apps. I think that's where the action is right now.
Fantastic, thanks. Anybody else want to build on that?
I would add the process stuff, process mining, process discovery, task mining, all of those sort of the gateways into helping enterprises identify where to apply all the rest of the stuff. Hopefully with a healthy focus on fixing and simplifying processes before just throwing tech at it.
How much do you see leaders and companies actually do this, right? I mean, we love to think about it as this ideal, typical stage of, hey, first you analyze, then you figure out what you can automate, and then you build something on top. How do you see this happen today? Is it really how you see it happen?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first if it helps. So I guess it's tough to go broad brushstrokes, and I think my colleagues would agree. I mean, there's a very small and active portion, I would say, of the community that continues to invest and push the envelope, that's looking for, I would say, leapfrog innovation. And those are very much screening in opportunities and with good top-down support and investment. I would say both in dollars and I would say in mindset, if you will. But on the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing a sizable percentage of people that are a bit disenamored with RPA. So they're just kind of just sitting there wondering what, it may be what did they do wrong, or who explained what incorrectly or overhyped what on the buy or sell or advisory side, and everybody's pointing to the other person. And so those guys are going nowhere. But I'm seeing kind of two extremes.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with you, Frank. I think the just do it automation era has to a large extent slowed down, and we're starting to see a lot more emphasis on value. Frank mentioned ROI earlier. It's ROI, and it's what kind of customer experience are you driving? What kind of revenue enhancement are you driving through automation? So automation value is becoming more and more prominent in the decision making for automation technologies, and there are several of them.
Yeah, I would concur. I know, Andreas, you want some more drama, but I would concur with what we just said. I think my biggest disappointment, the RPA space specifically, has meant a lot to me. I built a team there, succeeded in that space. I think globally we have absolutely failed at achieving the full potential and impact of that one technology. And I think we're on the path to fail at applying all of the other augmenting technologies that Frank just mentioned, because enterprises are going about it in the wrong way. Right? They're fascinated by the tech. They are not putting in the foundation stones of solid, enterprise change with a vision and a mission and communications and buy-in and all that other stuff. And so it's frankly a little disappointing. I think the potential is huge. The actual achieved outcomes thus far are frankly pathetic, and it's up to folks like us on this call to continue to try to educate everybody into a pragmatic, methodical, mature set of activities around understanding and then adapting and applying all of the tech available today.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that and for building on each other's answer. So I'm having a quick look at the chat here. So boy, that's really global for those of you who have joined, from Lebanon to Morocco to the UK, Austria, Italy, the US, where else? Many different places. Brazil, awesome. Yeah. So that's really awesome. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. And by the way, Ian has homes in most of those places. But that's
I wish. It was good to me. Not that good, Frank.
But maybe let's take one question from the chat. Maya is asking, what are the major misconceptions companies had about RPA, and where was the disconnect?
This shit is so easy a business analyst can do it, was the narrative that was dumped into the market for years. And when you tell people it's easy, they prepare for easy voyages, which means that they under-prepare for the real voyage ahead. And therefore, they didn't educate broadly enough. They didn't allocate enough funds. They didn't put together the right SLAs and objective measurements to decide what good is early stage, mid, and later stage in their maturity and scalability. And so I think you end up with a bunch of abandoned POCs and pilots that sort of prove the point, but never really bedded in a habit.
Yeah, if I could pile on, as I saw it, and I've been involved almost since the beginning, I think there were things that people should have known, and I would also say there were things that maybe that none of us knew, but we learned over time. What we should have known is, at least I felt was fairly basic, is when somebody sets out to quote unquote increase productivity. To this day, I hear this, and my colleagues may agree or disagree, but if I'm pulled into a discussion and the mission is increase productivity, and I can't get three people in that organization to agree on what that means, I know that the business case is dead. So the more specific and the more definable, the more measurable an outcome is, then you could compare. Then you could look and say, okay, fine, does this technology get us there? And I would say in many cases, RPA may not, because at the end of the day, it is non-intelligent automation of a task, in many cases a subtask. So how far does that get if we're able to free up 10% of Ian's time each day by some nifty tool, because we're automating his travel expenses reporting? And how do we know? How does he know? How do we know if that increases his productivity? We'll never be able to connect the dots. As I see it, I don't think I'm being a pessimist. I think I'm just being a pragmatist. What most of us didn't know going into this is, even if you ran the numbers and it looked like it worked, most of us didn't anticipate the cost on the back end to manage and repair these bots. I don't know. Maybe Ian, Shail, maybe you guys sensed that early on. That certainly was a surprise to me and many folks that I knew. That you say, "Wow," and I would argue maybe not too dissimilar from those of us that came from the outsourcing space, where we thought that in the early days, in the 90s, where we were doing outsourcing deals, and I was involved with a handful of really big ones, where the assumption was, okay, we ran the math, inked the deal, let's go have a steak dinner tonight, and we're looking good. And suddenly we say, wow, we're going to need a team of 3, 4, 6 people in maybe 2, 3 different cities to manage this thing. And then suddenly that kind of, the numbers got funky from that point forward.
Yeah.
Perfect. Maybe let's move on to the next question. Thank you both for sharing your perspectives. So, Shail, if I put my old IT hat back on for a second, and kind of goes in the direction also what Ian and Frank has said, I think there are a lot of landscapes that have evolved over time, right? Maybe you've integrated an acquisition or onboarded another division that's on a different platform, and you inevitably get to a multi-vendor operation. From an IT point of view, I know that's never really ideal, because you're trying to standardize as much as you can. So I'm wondering, is this multi-vendor automation landscape really the new reality, and how can automation leaders optimize their footprint?
No, that's a good question. As you heard Frank and Ian talk about the fact that there are multiple technologies in automation out there, right? There's IDP, process mining, machine learning capabilities, cognitive XYZ, and analytics, in addition to the RPA technology that we're talking about. So what I'm hearing from customers is that this multi-vendor landscape and the desire to have multiple technologies to do various different things under the umbrella of enterprise automation is inevitable. There are about 40 to 45,000 customers using RPA across the globe today. 40 to 45% of them are using multi-vendors. And that is continuing to grow as we see commoditization, particularly of the attended automation capabilities with some of the new large entrants that have entered into this space. What's really interesting is that over the last, I would say, 3 years or so, about $11 billion of investment has gone into RPA. A lot of it has gone into the 3 major players, and then the long tail of 65 other players that exist in the market. However, if you look at the acquisitions over the last maybe 2 years, 14 acquisitions totaling about $1.5 billion. So $10 billion gone into the core RPA vendors, $1.5 billion gone into acquiring 14 companies for large entrants like Microsoft, IBM, SAP, and various others to enter into this market, starting to commoditize attended automation. So with that happening, with that kind of a dynamic, there are a collection of technologies customers are using. They're struggling with how to stitch these technologies together, because the core fundamental focus of RPA vendors has always been to sell bots. Their orchestrators are lacking innovation, in my opinion. And because of that gap, customers are struggling with, if I have multiple vendors, how do I manage these vendors? Where's the single pane of glass to be able to manage the entire life cycle of automation? Andreas, if you walk into a CFO's office today, she cannot tell you that she can't give you financial information because she doesn't have a system for it. She does. If you walk into a CRO's office, he can't tell you that he won't give you sales forecasts. He has a system for it. It's a CRM system. If you walk into a COE today, not all of them, but a few of them, you do find Excel spreadsheets, SharePoints, PowerPoints, SMS messages to manage the entire life cycle of automation, to manage all these multitude of technologies that exist today. And that is a significant challenge. And we're starting to see the emergence, like we saw in the network world, like we saw in the cloud world, where we saw network optimization tools, cloud optimization tools emerge. We're starting to see the emergence of these single pane of glass automation optimization tools. There's still a long way to go in this market, but I think, coming back to your question, yes, I think the multi-vendor landscape is inevitable. Ian, Frank, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on this. My feeling is, if you really want to de-risk it and have one neck to choke, then outsource it. It's pretty straightforward as I see it. However, realize there's no risk-free path. So you outsource it. You have predictability there, but you are, as my colleagues know, and those on this in this discussion that have plugged in, that have been doing this for a while, you're giving up margin, and you're giving a potentially best-in-class solution. But that's the way to go. On the other hand, if you want best-in-class and you have a comfort level that your IT team has some experience, because you just don't, you really want to get beyond them learning this on your dime, if you will, if you're the internal client. And I would say the majority of Global 2000 have some experience here. Then you go best in class, and maybe ideally bring in a third party just for success insurance, and build something awesome. But even then, now you have, integration creates uncertainty. And I would assure you, whatever you like this year, you will not like next year. Look at Ian smiling. So yes, so that is it. So it is a bit of a dilemma. And then again, looking where we are now, and I promise I'm not getting a commission that each time I say ChatGPT-3, somebody sends me $50, Venmos me. But if you look at where we are now, we're on the precipice of the whole game changing. So we just need to be aware of it. It's still young and it's not enterprise ready. It's very cool. It's very interesting. I believe it's likely to change a whole bunch of things. That's my understatement. But nonetheless, I don't see it enterprise ready. One last thing I'd like to say, when we think about the buyers, obviously there's a lot of different ways to define large, medium, and small, et cetera. But what I've seen, and I think many of you have seen, is a significant difference in traditional companies versus kind of a digital native organizations of how they do this. So if you look, so I would caution against the big kind of macro view of the market, because the way you would approach, the way I would approach a strategy at JP Morgan, and the way that would be or not be embraced would be totally different the way I would approach it at Spotify, a place that was born in the cloud, digitally native. In the latter scenario, which is small, digital native, non-regulated industry, that's going to be a shorter cycle, less landmines. We're just going to be moving and grooving. It's going to be a lot faster. You get involved with a big bank or insurance company, the ultimate impact could be significant, but it will be painful. I know I have battle scars doing those deals, and I know a couple of my colleagues do.
Awesome. Anybody else want to add, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, this dates us all, I think, but that conference I mentioned that Frank held that introduced me to RPA was an outsourcing institute conference, not an RPA conference. And RPA came out of the outsourcing industry because we were using whatever capabilities, tools, resources we had available to us to make an outcome for a client. And in that case, it was transactional processing at a more affordable rate. We happened to use arbitrage, so we went offshore and used people in places like India. Then RPA came along, and it matched that to some degree because it enables us to continue to do that process, transaction activity, but with a different agent. It wasn't the Indian; it was a robot now, or so we said it would happen that way. But then we got too fascinated by the tech itself, and enterprises started to be told that they could do it so that you don't need a third-party partner who happens to be an expert in this. You can just fire up your HR team and ask them to spend their evenings and weekends digitizing the tasks they worked on. That did not work. So to Frank's point, I mean, working with an expert, I think will more likely be the path to success here, but it rests on all of us to figure out a little bit more modern, interesting, collaborative business models and collaborative structures, so that you're going to pay somebody, so there will be some margin, but hell, I'll tell you that margin will be a function of all of the pain, technical debt, and waste that's happened in enterprises in the last 10 years trying to figure out and deploy the RPA, IDP, process mining, conversational AI, et cetera, that they're tinkering with right now. So I think the future is some sort of hybrid where you're working with experts, still employing the capabilities and the subject matter experts internally, maybe to scout and find good areas to deploy this stuff. But that's how we're going to really make the most of the tools available to us and the big enterprises, not the digital native ones that can just start from scratch and be more structured and digital from the beginning. That's the way we all need to go.
Fantastic, thanks. I think well-rounded answer, and good to see the different perspectives here from you. So if I take a look at the chat, there are also some questions about AI. For example, Michael is asking, will ChatGPT and its equal but opposite generative AI detection become a new market category, if not in 23, then in 25? Or Christine is asking, do you believe that more attention towards data monetization in individual organizations will be the trend that will shape AI and automation in 2023? I think personally, I have an opinion on the generative AI topic, and I believe at least for the time being, like we're still, as an industry, as leaders, figuring out where can we actually use this and where can we use it in a way that it makes sense. If we, on one hand, have proprietary or models, on the other hand, we have open source models. If we use the ones that are proprietary, like ChatGPT, we don't really know what data has gone into it. And you see some discussions and concerns, for example, over at Amazon. Hey, this thing spits out code that looks suspiciously familiar to our own IP. Or questions around information security more broadly. Please don't copy confidential information into this chat prompt. Or are the answers that it generates really reliable, or do they just sound plausible? So I think there's still some things that the industry needs to figure out. And similar, I think also to RPA and other AI scenarios, we might want to have the human in the loop for some time to review it. It's good, at least at the moment, right? In the scenarios we see, and at the moment, it's good as a kickstart for ideas and to get creativity flowing, maybe to reword or rephrase a few things. And I'm sure this, we'll see 1,000 more ways to use this. I don't think it's its own category. I think much like AI, it'll help a new kind of application be powered and deliver more. And I think also on the other side, organizations looking into monetization. I think there are a few that are doing this or will be doing this and will be doing it well. But it also depends on the underlying architecture. Do you have the data strategy, the processes, things in place to be able to do that? And maybe part of that goes back to digital natives and established companies as well, who might be easy or who might be able to do it easier if you're starting new in the cloud, relatively new, compared to having legacy and history. But I'm curious, what do you think? What are you seeing there? Maybe just briefly, we have a few more minutes before we wrap up, and want to get to Ian and the question I have for you as well.
May I, in a friendly way, disagree with you with
Sure.
our host, and hopefully not you don't disconnect me. So I'm more optimistic than you seem to be, Andreas, with regard to ChatGPT, and I think it'll be significant. I think from a standpoint of categorization, I recommend that we all think less about what it is and be focused more about what it does, which you alluded to. I think it's all about use case. And I think there are people on this line now that have ideas for use cases. And I would say the right use case with the right commercial strategy is your fast track to independence. I think there'll be billions of dollars made. Some people will make millions. Some people will make billions for anyone. And the barrier to entry is very, very low, which is okay, double-edged sword. But still, the opportunity for someone now with an idea, getting a hold of technology that is cheaper than cheap. Why? Because it's kind of free, is significant. So I've been watching this very, very closely. I've been fortunate enough, maybe the older guy in the panel here, I've been through a couple of cycles. This is significant. However, yes, there will be a ton of lawsuits. I think IP becomes debated. I think it becomes very, very fuzzy, whether you're in the insurance game or a college student doing a paper. I think that becomes very, very fuzzy. However, you literally this weekend, you could launch a business and go. There are tremendous opportunities. One quick thing, if I may, on data monetization. From what I've seen, the discussions have been amazing. I've seen very few amazing stories. I think for the average company, if you're a bank or an insurance company or in telecommunications or you're a media company, the odds of you investing the time, by the way, you may have $1 billion worth of IP or data. And yes, data is the new oil, blah, blah, blah. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet. I think it's likely going to be an independent organization. I'll stop there.
Look, I'm very bullish on what you just said, Frank. Very bullish on generative AI as a whole. I wouldn't say just focusing on ChatGPT, but if you look at the marginal cost of energy, it's approaching zero. That's going to happen to the intelligence as well. Marginal cost of intelligence approaches zero, and it's happening at an extremely fast pace. If you look at transformers, when you look at BERT back in 2017 to ChatGPT now in less than slightly more than 5 years, the next 5 years you're going to see transformers even evolve even further, where prompts or questions are not going to be the key focus areas anymore. It's going to be the conversation that you and I are having right now. That is going to be prevalent in terms of how you interface with these systems. So I do think the opportunity is immense. I do think that there is significantly fast-paced technological innovation that is going on. So to Frank's earlier point, what you may like today, you may not like tomorrow. Same applies to ChatGPT as well. You may like it today, but there's something new coming tomorrow very quickly. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is I think it's going to change the structure of interfaces in society as we know it in many ways. You know, Frank talked about lawsuits. There's already discussions about how to use this or not to use this in schools. There are already discussions about, you know, who owns digital art, as an example. So these are new questions that are coming forth that we have not dealt with before as a society. So that's going to be a very interesting change across the world. And by the way, ChatGPT right now, the interface is English. Wait till that changes.
Yeah, excellent point.
Right.
Maybe Ian, if I may, I'll go over to you for the next question that we have, so we can finish somewhat in time. But I really appreciate the good conversation and discussion we're having here. Also the questions in the chat. You know, kind of goes in that direction of if there are, you know, these huge shifts and this new momentum for automation, for AI. I know you often post about this and call it the workers of the future in the future of work. So I'm wondering, what does it mean? What do you mean by that, and what does it take to be a future worker?
Sure. In the 30 seconds I have. I mean, ultimately, the divide of IT and business has held back true evolution, just because business knows what they need and IT knows what they can build and what they have. And so the last 10 years, we've aspired to bring those groups together, or at least empower business to run a gray rogue IT operation where they can get done what they think they need to get done. In the future, because every company is a software company, we all need to evolve our skills, and enterprises need to realize that, because as we just discussed, there'll always be a new tool, right? There always will be. Ultimately, we need to build a flexibility and a foundational digital literacy and digital quotient within enterprises, so that we can assess, incorporate, and apply whatever comes next, if it's ChatGPT or if it's RPA or whatever else. And then we need to be able to adapt the organization, design really good incentive structures and internal initiatives to make the most of it, right? Because right now in RPA, we were hoping business could do it. It's a little hard. We got IT doing it, but we don't have enough IT folks. We don't have enough developers in the world to build all of the apps and the configurations that businesses believe they need. And so you're leaning on your citizenry to do that. And yet the citizens aren't necessarily skilled up yet to be able to do that well. So most of the citizen development initiatives that are happening in the world are pilots. They're small in scale and impact. And so over time, foundation of digital literacy, we need to create a better organizational structure with incentives, because the smart people, the ones who actually know how to do this, are using it to digitize their jobs and then just go play video games for half a week, right? So those are the ones who have the moonlighting and the gigs and the side hustles. So they don't have any incentive to share what their ingenuity and their ability have allowed them to develop for their enterprise, because what's in it for them? So there are a lot of pieces that need to be worked out to truly harness the ingenuity of everyone within an organization, make them capable of adopting the tools that come out as they come out, and then to have these meaningful discussions about how we're going to experiment and prove out their value and apply them at a broader scale.
Perfect. Thank you. That's awesome. I think that's a really good way to also end today's session on. But before we do, I was wondering if you can each summarize one key takeaway for our audience today. Maybe starting with Frank, then to Shail, and to Ian again.
Wow, that's tough. I would say that my sense, I believe I coined a term about a decade ago, digital labor. And I for years kept thinking that we're almost there. RPA, nope. Intelligent automation, close, maybe sort of. Full-on AI, not sure. I believe we're approaching that tipping point where intelligent technology will shift from assisting knowledge workers to emulating knowledge workers. Now, that's exciting and also fairly scary. So there will be people that would be able to find opportunity here. But regardless of who you are, buyer, seller, advisor, entrepreneur, wannabe entrepreneur, I would recommend that you think about the following, and I jotted them down because I think it's important for each of us as people, workers, professionals, and you have a life, you have a family. I would say to power through the change, most relationships win. Biggest network helps. A mindset toward continuous learning. You can't, if you get stuck with the old dog and the new tricks, you're stuck. And last but not least, financial runway. Could be a good amount of turbulence depending on who you are. I think at that point, you have the best odds of powering through. Last thing I just want to say, this isn't a plug because I'm not selling anything, but I'm in active discussion with a handful of people that have ideas or looking to launch generative AI related ChatGPT related ventures. If you have something, you're looking for a sanity check or some advice on that, happy to offer it up. Just DM me, and I see lots of opportunities to make big things happen there.
Fantastic, thanks. Going over to Shail.
Yeah, look, there are two things that make up organization. It's people and everything else, right? So I would say that, the same applies to automation as well. Automation, it's not the bots driving your automation, it's actually the people involved in it and the ecosystem around it. So my key takeaway is that focus on the software aspects of automation, which is the culture. How do you create a borderless organization? How do you create a no fear zone? How do you actually empower people to drive automation inside your organizations? The last thing I want to say is that, look, I just want to express my gratitude sitting here listening to industry experts who have in many ways helped educate the market. Frank through 𝗪𝗛 and other means, Ian through LinkedIn Learning and other means as well, and Andreas, what you're doing as well. So I'd encourage the audience as a takeaway is follow them. There's a lot to be learned here.
Perfect. Thank you. And very nicely put, right? Hard to disagree with that one. So over to Ian.
And hard to follow those two guys, man. What the hell am I left with saying? I agree with everything that Frank and Shail just said. It is about people. It's about that commitment to digital literacy. It's a more exciting future now than it was 10 years ago when I started playing with this stuff. It's certainly more confusing, but it's just because we've got more tools and more players and more enthusiasm in the space. So you really owe it to yourself to stay plugged in and educate. And as the guys just said before me, the group on this call really has committed and dedicated a lot of their energy to doing that, to exploring for their own understanding and then sharing for the understanding and the development and betterment of our communities. So follow Shail, follow Frank, follow Andreas. Those guys are putting out incredible content. And thanks for having us, Andreas. This is a great discussion. Really appreciate you putting this together.
Thanks, Andreas.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us. When we started this call, we started on RPA. I wasn't quite sure how far into AI we would get, and here we were talking about generative AI and 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗙 sharing your expertise with us in the community here as well. Yeah, so I think the only thing left to do then is to close us out. Thank you so much for joining, everybody online. See you next time for another round of the Intelligence Briefing Live. What's the buzz? And thanks, Shail, Frank, and Ian for joining today.
Thank you.
Guys. Hey, good to see you guys. Take care.
Take care.